What are the stories of impact and ingenuity that are transforming our cities? Join us on the Urban Q, where we talk about tackling urban conundrums and celebrate stories, ideas, and people that help us create better cities for all. Hello, and welcome to the Urban Q. Today I have with me Marguerite Hunter Blair. Marguerite is Chief Executive of Play Scotland. She established the Scottish Play Commission and led the campaigns for Scotland's play strategy and a statutory duty for play in the Planning Act. Marguerite is Chair of the Play Strategy Refresh Group, a Vice Chair of Planning Aid Scotland, and Secretary of IPA Scotland. She is former CEO of Play Board Northern Ireland and was the Community Services Manager at the Belfast City Council. Earlier this year, she was honored with an Order of the British Empire for services to play, to learning, and to health. Welcome, Marguerite, and thank you for joining us on our podcast, The Urban Q.
Thank you very much, Jaya, for that lovely invitation and introduction. That was very kind of you.
Great. So, Marguerite, there's a question that I ask all my guests as an opener, and that is about favorite cities. And you have a lot of work around play. So if I were to say, what are some good examples of the most playful city that you've experienced, or which is your most favorite playful city? Which one would it be?
Goodness, that's quite a question. Not just because I'm from Scotland originally, but I do think that one of the most playful features I've seen in any city is the water feature outside the Parliament, the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. So this new building, this very important building in terms of how we legislate and government in Scotland, and right outside its front doors is this very playful water feature. And it's actually lovely to see children playing in it in the summer, without invitation, without any formality. You'll see children just running through the water, getting themselves wet. So I love that about Edinburgh. I think in cities across Scotland generally, we have a lot of green space. We're very fortunate. And I think it's making that space more accessible that becomes the challenge. But what I love in European cities is the fact that there's lots of places to sit outside in the public realm. And it always makes me think about Article 15 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and this right that young people have to freely associate in the public realm. And I think that's something that takes good design. And what makes a good social space for teenagers and young people actually is a good place for all of us. It's intergenerational. So it's about designing these really inclusive play spaces at the heart of our cities that take account of the weather and the elements, but allow all generations to mix and mingle together.
That's wonderful. So this takes me straight into the first question that I would then like to ask you is about, tell us more about your work with children, the work with Play Scotland. What was its objective and how did it come about?
Okay, so it was set up in 1998. And the main objective of the organisation was making the child's right to play a reality. So that sounds very laudable and good. And then you start to unpick that and think, well, what does that look like in reality? And certainly when I joined back in 2006, I felt that we were missing a lot of baseline data about play across Scotland. So it's quite hard to lobby for something that you don't actually know what's going on, what improvements you need to make, and actually what's working well, because what's working well is what you want, to roll out across the country. So we carried out a baseline survey, and what became very obvious straight away was that local authorities set local priorities, and that's really important. That's their job to do that. And they do that in quite a challenging, limited budget way. So they've got lots of competing priorities. But what we found was that they didn't all have a strategic approach to play. They didn't all have a plan that children would have adequate play provision. So we started then to formulate the argument about the need for baseline information locally. And to achieve that, we realised that we would need a national measure so that everybody measured the same thing in the same way. So when we asked about maybe how much do you spend on children's play, every local authority would include the same information, whether that was parks, playgrounds, formal spaces, supported informal play spaces. And at the heart of that is the satisfaction of children, young people, and families with the play offer. And thereafter, you can measure improvements against the benchmark. So that might sound quite straightforward, and that was our how we started to craft the argument back in 2007. And we will have achieved that objective in 2027, when every local authority in Scotland will have completed a play sufficiency assessment. So it's been a long journey, not for the faint-hearted, and we've learned a lot along the way.
That's wonderful. But let me take a step back and ask you two things. I mean, we do know that the needs of young children and adolescents are largely overlooked in most parts and in urban planning in most cities across the world. Um, why is play important, first of all? And why is this topic, very important, something that we should all be paying attention to? And you have spearheaded initiatives across Scotland where children's inputs have led to these tangible changes. So, how did all of these places engage children effectively to create solutions that reflect their needs and aspirations?
So I'll go back to 2008 in Scotland when we had a report came out called Equally Well. And one of the great champions of public health in Scotland at that time was Professor Sir Harry Burns. And he was our chief medical officer. And he really understood the importance of place. Place is at the heart of health and healthy communities. And he also understood and became a big play champion that play had to be part of that offer in local places. And I think that really helped all of us to frame our arguments in some ways in a smarter way. Because actually, just asking for more play here and now so that children have good, fun childhoods, no
Right.
one disagrees with that. But that doesn't allow you to leap to the top of the priority list when you're
Mhm.
campaigning for resources. So we actually had to get really into the argument, really had to understand place and placemaking. And we really had to understand what the links were to children's health and well-being, what the links were to alleviating the effects of poverty in disadvantaged communities. And we had to really understand the links with how to improve children's educational attainment in school. And play has a huge role to play in delivering these high level outcomes. But once you start to link it with these really high level outcomes that governments, national and local, and really at community level, are struggling with every day, we realized then that's where we had to map play into those outcomes. And that became really important. And it led to something called the Place Standard tool in Scotland. And after that tool was up and running and Play Scotland was involved in the play and recreation spoke in the wheel of that tool, later on, there was actually a version for children and young people that Play Scotland and A Place in Childhood co-produced for the Scottish Government. And it's called How Good Is My Place?
Mm.
And it allows children and young people to talk about their place, how good it is, what they would like to see improved. So this children's voice at the heart of assessing their whole area, not just their play space, the whole community that they live in, is incredibly important. And Play Scotland took that further then with tools called Getting It Right for Play, which allowed local authorities to carry out play sufficiency assessments locally. And at the heart of those tools, about all the different types of play that we were talking about, can children run, jump, have challenge? Can they experience different heights? Can they experience the elements? It's also about their satisfaction. Are they happy with the offer? Is it
Mm.
good enough? Is there enough of it? Is it accessible? And one of the things that drives me in my job a lot was listening to a parent of a child when she was 4 years old and she had complex needs. And after she was four, the mum had to drive past the local play park because there was nothing in the park that could her daughter could play on anymore.
Mm.
And she said it was heartbreaking when her child cried then every time they passed the park and cried because she wanted to go to the park. But she said the saddest day of all was the day she turned her head the other way and didn't look out the car window at the park and didn't cry anymore. She had accepted that there was no play opportunity for her, aged 4. So our aim is for every child, not 80%, not 96%, but 100% of children and young people to experience a wide range of play opportunities, not just a swing, not just a roundabout, but a wide range of play opportunities, as every other child has a right to expect and experience as well.
That's wonderful, and what a heart-wrenching story there a little bit also. You talked about, having to make the case and the salience for why play is important and not just something for fun, but how it's needed for sort of development and many other things that you have to experience as an adult and how that lends to your, development, physical, mental, all sorts. Now, when we talk about land, because putting play in place often requires, has land requirements, whether it's for parks or public spaces. And urban land use, as we know, often grapples with competing demands. So, for example, commercial development versus open space and low-income housing. You help make a sound case for funding for the play sector and for policies for play across education, health, and planning. And even as you work to improve spaces for children, how do you ensure that it does not lead to the pricing out of lower income residents for the neighborhood? And how do you make the case for play versus these other types of needs in a community?
That's a very big question, Jaya, and I know we have a limited time, so I'll try and be quite succinct with this answer, but there's an awful lot in there. Now, an example I might jump to straight away um, to try and illustrate my answer would be the Children's Wood in Glasgow. And the Children's Wood in Glasgow is a self-seeded wood in the centre of Glasgow. Quite hard to believe, but Glasgow is full of green spaces and the land hadn't been developed. And a number of schools had been using it for many years. It was covered in red ash. And after a while, the schools had stopped using it and it had become a self-seeded silver birch wood. And a lot of young people in the community played in the trees. And I think there was up to 26 local schools used it to bring children from the primary school out into the wood. The local community had raised beds where they planted and grew local fruit and veg. There was bees. There was a forest kindergarten in it. So it was multi-generational, multi-used space in the heart of Glasgow. And then, of course, the developers come looking for land because we need more housing. And these are all very valid competing priorities. And the land, it turned out, was worth £10 million. That was a lot of money. And I'm talking now over 10 years ago. And so you've got the local authority with a lot of deprivation, with competing priorities, with one committee saying, we want that to stay as green space for the community to benefit. That's very good for their health. We understand that argument. And another committee saying, yes, but we need more housing. And we think that that's an ideal space to develop more housing. And the community group is then leading a fight to retain the land. And there's actually a book written about this. Um, and by Emily Coates, who led the fight, and she invited Play Scotland to support her on this journey. We have something called the Community Empowerment Act, and that had led to something called community asset transfers in the community, where communities can apply to own land for a period of time to, if they work with it and manage it for community benefit. And without going through the whole story of the Children's Wood, it was a real genuine campaign where play was a key part of that. But actually, at the heart of it was the right of everyone in the community to use this green space that had become so popular and so widely used. And it was in an area of very high deprivation, very close to a part of Glasgow where the life expectancy of males was in the late 50s. So it was incredibly important that we had space there. So to try and address that key point that you made, one of the things that we found out during COVID was that the people who suffered the most when people had to stay indoors were people who lived in flats. And predominantly the people living in flats without access to gardens tended to be people in lower income areas. And quite often it wasn't the case that there was no green space around. It was just that they didn't either have access to that space or they didn't feel comfortable accessing that space. So, as we all know, we can't make more land, but there is land out there. And I think we have to be very clear about the design, the landscaping of it, the accessibility of it, and how we encourage everyone to use it and make it usable by everyone. And sometimes that can be as simple as some planting. It can be removing maybe some structures that are there already, maybe changing the planting and creating things, very simple things like seating. But it's not just Play Scotland, communities really understand it.
Yes. No, so that is, you've made a great case for this, and clearly this is now through planning legislation and all of that. It's embedded in the DNA of, Scotland and how the country works and engages with play. But how did you navigate, political changes? Um, because, if one party has signed up for it and they say this is a great idea, let's do it, and then that goes away. I mean, how do you navigate that? And how do you basically ensure that everybody who's engaging with play is also prioritizing inclusivity because you are talking about intergenerational spaces? So, what are the lessons there that other cities can learn?
But again, in Scotland, we were very fortunate that we had our Scottish Parliament.
Mhm.
And at the heart of it is you need every politician from every party to understand why play is important. Some will know that, some will have possibly been play workers in their previous life before they were politicians. They will have been planners, some of them will be opera singers. A parliament and a local government is actually a collection of talents. So you need to understand that and not just think of them as a monolith and really try
Mhm.
and understand the personality. And
Right.
the personality of our parliament is very strong. And it was created in such a way that it really wanted local people, ordinary people, to engage. And there was something in the Scottish Parliament called the Lobby Garden, which is just an open space where politicians and their advisors walk between their office space into the chamber at the Parliament. And you can apply as a community group, as a lobby group, to have a space there, have a stall, usually a table, and put your messages up as what you're trying to achieve. And we did that quite early on in 2006. And we engaged with everyone. And it was quite hard to spot the politicians from the advisors, from people just visiting this new Parliament building. So in the end, we just started to chill and we had a rota of about 6 to 8 play workers. And I don't think it's allowed now, but we had play equipment, we had small trampolines, we had one of the politicians' granny on a trampoline on with a walking stick, jumping up and down. We had school children on visits to the Parliament. We had lots of play equipment. We engaged with everyone from security to the support staff, cleaning the building, maintaining the building, to everyone. And by the time we left, the First Minister said to us that he felt we had delivered a very successful lobby opportunity because he said there was nobody in the building didn't understand the messaging.
Yeah.
And we kept it simple and we kept it relevant and spot on. We've usually tried to come up with a pledge or something that everyone felt they could support and sign up to, and created lots of social media opportunities, whether they're playing with balls, skipping ropes, or we weren't allowed the trampoline the next time round. But so playfully engaging in the first instance, backing it up with a series messages. In Scotland, relentlessly, we have children indoors, overweight, anxious, um, and we need to address these things, and play is one of the ways we can do that. So we need to make the argument, we need to keep it concise. We rely so much on researchers giving us the evidence because you can't go off your instinct or your intuition or anecdotes. I saw this somewhere, I've heard someone saying this. You really need to back up what you're talking about with evidence all the way. So the researchers and gathering that evidence is really important. The media, so important as well to carry the message. So we built on that. For those early beginnings, we then had a petition in the parliament. We had motions supporting the petition. We had politicians talking about how important play was. And we prepared briefing papers because you can't expect the politicians to be over all the details that we know. That's our job. You include everyone. There is no favourites. And we then had a play charter, and we encouraged all the politicians to become play champions by signing up to the play charter.
So, Marguerite, that's wonderful. And I like what you're saying about you really have to build the case. It has to be simple, it has to be powerful, and it has to resonate. And I think that's the bottom line, that it has to resonate. It probably does, because, like you said, everyone has family, everyone experiences this through their own childhood about how important this is. So, this is an issue which can span different types of stakeholders, party lines, and all of those challenges. If I were to present you with a blank canvas, to paint a city, say, what are the three features that you would prioritize for children and inclusiveness and intergenerational spaces?
But I think just going back to that example I used at the start about the children's wood, I think urban forestry is so important.
Yes.
And that goes back to something else I touched on at the beginning, which was about almost protection from the elements, whether it's the rain or the sun, but it's also to do with shade and light, isn't it? And growth. So urban forestry, I think, is actually incredibly important. I think places for people to sit down, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying that because I'm getting on in years, but sitting down together is such an important thing. And I also think that we do need to have good quality inclusive play equipment and a range of it, not just the one swing or the one roundabout. And the
Right.
reason I say that, I mean, the landscaping around it is critical. But we do find that it's the equipment that becomes the catalyst that brings children out to the play park.
Yeah.
They possibly spend most of their time then playing with sand or water features there, but it is the equipment that actually is the wonder feature that brings them out. So I think if we got all of that right, it's a better place for everyone.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. I love those three things: urban forests, places to sit together, right? And then talking about play equipment, which is inclusive of everyone. And I think that is especially an area which I don't think very many people or places pay attention to. And that is so important. Um, well, thank you so much, Marguerite, for this discussion and for doing the work that you're doing. Good luck, and I hope to be in touch. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jaya. It's been a complete pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking about play with you today, and it's just been lovely to share our thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marguerite.